Welcome to the Explainer. We make hundreds, maybe thousands of choices every single day, and we like to think we're in the driver's seat, right? Logically weighing all the options. But what if the very words used to describe those options are secretly doing the steering? Today, we're going to dig into the hidden power of language and what it all means in the age of AI. All right, let's just dive right in with a really fundamental question about how we make decisions. For a long, long time, a lot of what we thought we knew about economics and even psychology was built on this one single powerful idea about human nature. And that big idea? It's called the consequentialist assumption. Basically, it suggests that when we face a choice, we act like these perfectly rational calculators, just weighing the outcomes and picking the one that gives us the biggest personal payoff. It's a really neat logical theory, but there's a huge catch. It often doesn't match how real people behave out in the wild. So, what happens when you actually put this assumption to the test? Well, researchers have been doing exactly that for years, using some simple but kind of brilliant economic games. Let's take a look at a classic one. This is called the Dictator Game. It's incredibly simple. Imagine you're given 10 bucks. You get to decide how to split it with a second, totally anonymous player. Now, that player has zero say. They can't reject your offer or anything. According to that old consequentialist idea, the logical choice is a no-brainer. Keep all $10 for yourself. But that's not what most people do. A really significant number of us actually choose to share some of the money. So this behavior creates this fascinating puzzle. I mean, if we're not just trying to maximize our own bank account, what else is guiding our decisions? It's a question that really hints that there's something way more complex than just pure self-interest going on inside our heads. And it turns out, one of the most powerful factors is something we almost always overlook: the specific words used to describe the choice we're making. Okay, check this out. In one famous study, researchers had people play the exact same strategic game, but they gave it two different names. When they called it the community game, people were way more cooperative. But when they called it the Wall Street game, cooperation just plummeted. Same game, same payoffs, totally different behavior. The only thing that changed was a single word in the name. And we see this pop up again in the Dictator Game. Researchers found that if the generous action was labeled donate, people were much more altruistic. But when that very same action was called boost, generosity took a nosedive. Language isn't just decoration, it's actively framing our choices and changing what we do. So what this all points to is a huge rethink in how we understand choice. Those old models, the ones based purely on outcomes, are clearly missing a huge piece of the puzzle. We're really in the middle of a paradigm shift towards a new theory of decision-making, one where language isn't just on the sidelines, it's a star player. Okay, so let's see how this shift from outcomes to language becomes incredibly urgent when we bring in one of the biggest topics on the planet today: artificial intelligence. Why is it so urgent? Well, because these incredibly sophisticated AI chatbots like GPT-4 are quickly becoming our partners in making some of life's most critical decisions. We're asking for advice on everything from our finances to our health to really complex business strategies. And the crucial part is, they communicate with us through natural language. This just raises a massive question. We know that super subtle changes in wording can sway human choices. So what happens when the one providing the words is an AI? The linguistic frames it uses, even totally unintentionally, could have enormous consequences, steering us down paths we might not have chosen otherwise. So, a team of researchers came up with this really novel idea. Could we use AI itself to actually quantify the impact of language on our decisions? They designed this clever experiment to see if an AI could analyze the language of a game and then predict how humans would actually behave. Here's the setup. First, they went out and collected the real instructions that were used in 61 different Dictator Game experiments. Then they fed all of these instructions to GPT-4 and asked it to rate the sentiment of the key actions, things like keeping all the money or giving half, on a scale from very negative to very positive. And finally, they checked to see if there was a link between the AI's sentiment scores and how generous the real human players were in those original studies. Now, get a load of what GPT-4 found. On average, it rated the selfish action of keeping all the money with a pretty low sentiment score of 2.6. But in contrast, it rated the prosocial actions, the ones that benefit others, like giving half or even all the money away, with much, much higher scores, both over 5. The AI was clearly picking up on the social and moral weight that was baked into the language used to describe these actions. And here's the kicker.
The result was absolutely crystal clear. When GPT-4 rated the language describing generous actions as more positive, the human participants in those exact experiments actually behaved more generously. The AI's analysis of the words was able to predict human behavior. It's pretty wild.
And this wasn't just some random fluke. The finding was statistically significant, with something called a p-value of less than 0.01. In plain English, that means there's less than a 1% probability this result was just due to random chance. This is really strong evidence that we can use the sentiment of language to predict how people will act, and it paves the way for a totally new language-based theory of choice. So what does this all mean for the future of how we make decisions and for our growing relationship with artificial intelligence? Well, this is really just the beginning. The researchers think this same approach can be used to study all sorts of other behaviors, like cooperation, honesty, and trust. Future work could go way beyond a simple positive-negative scale and start to analyze a whole spectrum of emotions and moral values. And the ultimate goal here is to build new mathematical models of choice, what are often called utility functions, that actually formally include language as a key variable.
So if there's one big thing to take away from all this, it's that the words we see and use are not just some decorative fluff. They are a fundamental, core part of our decision-making engine. They literally change the math of the choice itself.
And that leaves us with a final and pretty provocative thought to chew on. As AI becomes more and more fluent in our language, and as we rely on it more and more to help frame our world, we have to ask ourselves, who or what will ultimately be shaping our choices? The answer to that question is going to define the next chapter of the human-machine relationship.